Hello and welcome to this new video of Top 5, where in each episode a special guest tells me about top 5 games of all times. My name is Arturo. You can find me on Twitter as at Arturo Nereu. And today we have a person that really knows his games. It's a person that I recently met, but every time I have conversations with him, it's always a delight. So today I welcome Abdullah Hamed. Hey man, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you, Arturo.
No, thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for, I know it's kind of late, but I really appreciate it. And I'm very excited about today's conversation.
It, it's never too late to talk about games.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And then that's a beautiful thing that games, and probably this is the same for you, but games help us form like these friendships and these work relationships and all these things. So it's always great. So
Yeah.
the first thing I would like to ask you is tell us a bit about yourself. What do you do? Yeah.
Yeah. I actually grew up in Saudi Arabia from two Saudi parents. And uh, yeah, since I was a kid, I grew up around video games, and video games were definitely an escape for me. Um, as most nerdy kids growing up around the world, you have to deal with a lot of isolation, I should say, with friends and stuff like that. You're
Yeah.
very introverted a little bit, at a young age. So video games were my escape. That was my world. And I loved it since I was a kid. My cousins always bought the latest machines, and I watched them play games. And then once I got older, I started having my own machines, and that was just my world. I just engulfed myself into it. And when I graduated, like I knew since I was a kid, like I want to work in video games. This is
Okay.
my calling. And I was very lucky. I'm one of the lucky people who like found what they wanted to do really early. And then I moved to America after college and studied computer science, learned about the business of video games. And that was before like commercial indie game engines that are free
Mhm.
used to be available. I think at that time, Unity just came out around 2006. Before that, there was Torque Engine, I think.
Yeah.
Um, but I was learning OpenGL, and then I decided that that was way too hard for me. So I lost all hope about working in video games. I moved back to Saudi Arabia to be with my family for a while, and I wanted to work in video games, always did. And then one day I found a person in Saudi Arabia, Rashid Al Balla, and that man had he liked to invest in people and invest in tech, and he was always a pioneer in investing in tech over there in Saudi Arabia. And he hired me to start a video game business for him. And at that time, um, it was around 2010. And at
Mhm.
that time, the Flash game world was everything. That was where all the indie darlings that made Xbox Live games came from. They came from the Flash game world, and it nurtured them and made them, I think, sculpt their skills, and that would make them be able to publish great games. Um, so I decided that I wanted to do the same for the Arabic game world. There was no outlets available for Arab game developers to create games, to make money out of games. They couldn't
Mhm.
publish on Steam, they couldn't publish on iOS or Android, and they had to self-publish in physical form. And because Arab countries are very have very rigid and different commerce, what's it called, tariffs and commerce laws and content laws, so it was really hard to physically distribute something
Mhm.
between different
Mhm.
countries, even though there's like 400 million Arabs, I think. um, so the business didn't really flourish
Okay.
in the Middle East. There was attempts, but because of the second Gulf War, in the beginning of the like around beginning of the 90s,
Mhm.
it caused one of the biggest companies that were on their journey to make their own games to shut down. So there wasn't really attempts to kind of serious attempts to create video games. There are some that are great, and there's a lot of veterans in the game industry now that came from that era. But I wanted to kind of spark it again, to give those developers, the indie game developers, a way to make money and succeed. So the company that I built for Rashid was a game portal for games.
Mhm.
But the twist here is that I would be revenue sharing ad revenue with the developers.
Okay.
Created that, but then we created like game jams, a pan-Arabian game jam, and in hopes that that will raise the quality of video games in the region. And actually, Rami Ismail from Vlambeer was our second keynote speaker for the second time. It was before Super Crate Box, I think, even. Like, it
Okay.
was really early on, because he's Af-Egyptian, so we thought it was very relevant to have somebody who's a veteran in the Flash game world
Yeah.
to come and talk to us. And it was a real pleasure. Like, we're really good friends now because of that. And so yeah, so after doing that for a while, but then iPhone and Android became very popular to the point where Flash games were irrelevant now. So we had to shut down, but the community still continues.
What was this portal available to the entire world, or was just?
Yeah, it was called Game Taco with a K, like an octopus in Japanese.
Okay.
And the game jam was called Game Zenga. And it still continues until today. The community manages it themselves, and I think a guy from Iraq called Danar is the one that's managing it right now. But yeah, people just pop up from the community and want to make it happen, and they make it happen. And I have no hand into it in it right now. It's completely managed by the community, and it's great to see that. But the website as a website shut down.
Yeah.
There is a Facebook group that is active sometimes. There's a Discord channel, but that's about it. And after that, I worked for PlayStation, trying to build a mobile publisher. That lasted for a year. Then I worked for another free-to-play company that was making games for the Arabic world. They were doing a lot of games that are very similar to Supercell games, like Clash of Clans or Battle Royale. Is it called Battle Royale? No, not
Clash
Battle Royale. Clash Royale, yes.
Clash Royale, yeah.
And I worked for them for a while, and it was great. I think we actually knocked Clash of Clans down from the top grossing list in a couple of different countries. It was fun, but I wouldn't say free-to-play games were my passion. But after that, I felt like I tried everything. I tried the free-to-play, I tried the game portals, and I tried creating a game developing community in Arabic-speaking world. And it was time for me to try something else, a bigger challenge. And that's when I moved to Seattle. And I started working for Amazon App Store because I worked in mobile for a while. And recently I joined Microsoft. And that's how we met.
That was actually the next point that I wanted to touch on. But first, this is everything that you just mentioned is new to me. You know, I knew a bit about like your past, and I knew about these things that you're mentioning, because when we met, you mentioned this. But I want to ask you: do you think that the landscape for people wanting to make games in Saudi Arabia has changed from the time that you were there?
If anything, there has been a lot more serious attempts now.
That's good.
Before, it was a lot of game jams, a lot of mini games, and a lot of excitement around just learning and growing together. And now a lot of developers have either quit because it was just in conflict with their daily lives, with them building a family or something like that, because it's really hard. There's no like studios there. There's maybe like one or two that could sustain people financially. The rest are people who are just doing it indie, and even those two studios are technically indie. Um, they don't have a big publisher behind them or anything.
Okay.
So there are attempts, but it's been taking a lot of them just reverted back into their own studios and started working on things for the long term. Some projects popped up and people got excited about them and disappeared. Some of them are still happening under the radar. There's a lot of things that I don't know about because I've been away for 5 years now. So
Mhm.
I only see them when they pop up on Twitter.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
but this is very interesting because it's similar to the landscape in, let's say, Latin America and places
Mm,
like Mexico. We are fortunate that we're closer to the States, right? So going to
mm,
like GDC, it's expensive, it's a challenge, but it's most cases a 4 hour flight. But in reality, it's similar. Like there are not many large studios. There are just small ones, and basically, if you want to work in games, it's like or you go to a small studio or you start your own studio because it's not
mm.
like in the States where you have like literally thousands of big studios where you could apply to. So it's very interesting. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and culturally, in some of those countries, like Saudi Arabia, it's Saudi Arabia historically has been like, let's say in the 90s and early 2000s, it was very religious,
Mhm.
and things like music and art were not encouraged at all. It was actually considered very evil to create music or to create art. Arts resembling humans and creatures. So not a lot of people really invested in their talents to either make music or to create art or to design in general. But only recently where that with Saudi Arabia changed dramatically in the past 5 years. And there has been a lot of efforts, including investments from the government in video games.
Yes.
They invested recently in a character in The Last King of Fighters, where there was a girl fighter that was from Saudi Arabia that was consumed by a demon, and like her wearing the hijab was like part of that demon. So it was very interesting, and it was designed by a Saudi person, and it's great. It's amazing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's amazing to see that type of investment, and I hope it changes. Like maybe it's not my generation who's going to create the next big game there, but it's going to be the next generation after that. Saudi Arabia is also like a very small country. Like the population is about 20 million, 25 million. That's about the number of people in like the greater Tokyo uh
Yeah.
area. So it's not that big of a market, and if you do want to create games for that region, it used to be mobile. Like that's how you reach everybody in that world is by creating mobile games. But if Saudi developers need to really succeed, they need to do something for the rest of the world, not just for Arabic countries,
Yeah,
especially if
yeah.
they're doing things on console and on PC. But there's a lot of stories that need to be told from there. There's a lot of friends who do animations and do like shorts and cartoons and now movies. A friend of mine just made an animated movie for Netflix
Oh wow,
called
nice.
Musamir, and it's very hyper local, but at the same time, it's very approachable by the rest of the world. And that those kind of things that are starting to bubble up now,
Yeah, yeah.
and you're going to see a lot more games from that region pretty soon, I feel.
That's very exciting because I totally agree with you. There are multiple stories that the world should know. One for entertainment purposes, for cultural purposes, but also just to have some sort of preservation of those stories, right? Because we
Yeah.
have books, we have movies, but
Mhm.
I think we also, as humans, express through games. So the fact that countries where in the past you could not make games and now you can, it's great because in the future, and I'm thinking like thousands of years from now, you can also
Yeah.
understand humanity by looking at those games. So yeah, I'm happy about that. I understand, and probably I'm not gonna say I understand, but for some people from certain countries, it's challenging, right? The fact that you and I have the chance to work at these companies, to go to the States, is something that not many people can do. So it's challenging, but at the same time, I think people who have been able to do that should support people who want to do that or who want to be successful from their countries. Not everybody has to move to another country. Some people just say like,
Hmm.
I want to stay in my country. I don't want to go to another place. I want to stay where I was born. But um, yeah, makes me happy to hear that those type of stories that you're mentioning, that things are getting better, that the government is
Hmm.
supporting, because there are other places that I'm not going to mention who are actually the other way, whose government just said like, no, we don't feel like we want to support this anymore, so yeah, we're not going to support. So
Yeah.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah. I just don't want people to like, learn about my culture from Disney's Aladdin,
Absolutely, and yeah. There are so many things. Yeah, you nailed that. Actually, I was listening to these musician. I'm not sure if you listen to NPR Music, the National Public Radio YouTube
I
channel.
don't. I watch their Tiny Desk concerts
Yeah,
on YouTube.
that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I recently was just, I don't know what I was doing, and I watched a tiny concert by this lady named Madam Gandhi, who
Uh-huh.
is from India, and she said something very interesting. She said something like, "We have to tell our stories because otherwise someone else will tell our stories." And they will get the stories wrong. So I'm not sure if she invented that or what, but it resonated a lot with me. Like what you said.
Hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's so great, man.
Yeah.
So yeah, the next thing that I wanted to mention, and yeah, we should get to the point of the video, but it's always great. Is the fact of how we are connected, because you mentioned that you know Rami.
Hmm.
I'm not gonna say I know him, but I've met him in
Hmm.
I met him in Colombia last year or
Hmm.
2 years ago, and then I met you. And also, you mentioned that you worked at Microsoft.
Right.
Sorry, at Amazon.
Yes.
And one person that worked with you, John,
Yes.
now works with me at Unity. So
Uh-huh.
it's great how how this network of people from different places, from different
Yeah.
backgrounds, ended up like with these connections in between. So
Exactly. Yeah.
it's
The
really
game
cool.
industry is small, and that's what's so interesting about it is that once you get into it, you if you know somebody, you're connected to like half of the industry.
Yeah.
It's
It's pretty cool. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is that we met via our jobs, and
yeah,
there was actually a big chance that we never met at all, right? Because when we worked
yeah,
together, next week or something like that, you said like, "Oh, I'm not gonna be doing this anymore." So there's
yeah,
this other person, and it was just
hmm
by 1 week.
yeah,
So it's also interesting how these things
yeah.
happen. Okay, so let's start with games. With
Okay,
actually
sure.
your games. The first game, it's one game that's well, it's not super old. With the other interviews that I've done, usually I say like, "Oh, this game is 22 years old" or something like that. But
Hmm.
now, in perspective, it's like, okay, not that old. But it's a game that I have to admit I didn't play when it was released.
Hmm.
It's a game published and developed by Konami in Japan from 1998. It's a stealth and action adventure game for the PlayStation. The game
Yes,
is Metal Gear Solid. So
yes. Well, Metal Gear is the one that's in '87, I think. Was it? Or what's
87,
the date you just mentioned?
98. Did I say?
Oh, 98.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes,
98.
yes, yes. Metal
Yeah,
Gear
yeah,
Solid. Yes.
yeah,
For some
Metal Gear
reason, I
Solid.
heard 1980s.
Probably I said I'm still struggling with with numbers in English, so sorry about that.
Well,
But yeah, 98.
well,
So
it's I'm in love with the series. Metal
okay,
Gear has I the first one that I played was Metal Gear Solid, which is like you said, it was 98,
yeah,
and it blew my mind of how cinematic video games can be.
okay.
Um, and Also, as a teenager in Saudi Arabia, you live around a lot of conspiracy theories around you. So it really fueled a lot of my curiosity about politics,
Okay, okay.
about the world and the complexities of the world, and it really helped me shatter a lot of my um, beliefs about what is apparent in politics. Yeah, the game is fiction,
Hmm.
but I learned a lot uh, about uh, uh, about just events in the world through Metal Gear. There is kind of like almost like a history lesson when you like dig deeper into the documents of the game and whatnot, where it teaches you a lot about the Iran Contra. It teaches you about a lot of things that happen in Central America and some of the history of the CIA and things like that. And it just really was an over the top stylistic game where killing is not the main purpose.
Hmm.
It's a military game that's really anti-military. It's a war game about anti-war, anti-nuclear war. And it really had a very strong an anti-war message. And I'm a big fan of Godzilla also, which is also
Uh-huh.
like an anti like I like kaiju stuff in general.
Okay, that's very cool. That's very cool.
Yeah, and so like it mixed like the kaiju anti-nuclear thing that Godzilla had with more modern tech involved and genetic modification. it's it's wonderful. It's also really ridiculous, and that's part of why I love it. It's over the top ridiculous, and the stealth game was really solid. PlayStation at that time, like it really pushed the PlayStation and what it could do.
Hmm. Hmm.
And Yeah, first time I ever heard David Hayter sound Solid Snake, and it was an amazing performance. um and you just fall in love. I just fell in love with all the characters in the game. And that's when I also started playing the older ones afterwards. So they came out, the
Yeah.
Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake were out on the MSX, which was very popular where I grew up, and that was kind of like the first system that I ever used. So I went back and played those, and Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake was only in Japanese, so I didn't really play that much because I didn't know what to do.
Was only
Um,
Japanese because you could only get it like imported from Japan, or
yeah, yeah.
because okay, okay.
It was just never translated, and it was released in 88, I think. Um, yeah, that's the first two games before Solid. Um,
What's the name of the second game?
it's called Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake.
Oh, I was getting confused with Snake Eater, which is the third
No,
one.
that's Metal Gear Solid 3.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, sorry,
So it's
sorry, sorry.
Metal
Yeah,
Gear 2 Solid Snake, Metal
yeah.
Gear Solid, Metal Gear Solid 2, Metal Gear Solid 3, and so on.
Okay, okay,
Um,
okay.
yeah, you just fall in love, and then you hear things in the game, in Metal Gear Solid 1, and like referencing the older stuff. So, and I just got the internet in Saudi Arabia during that time. That's when we just got internet over there. So I just go on the internet and look for the game, look for the ROMs, look for an emulator to run it, and just looking for anything to be able to play that game. And it was just like a really cool world that I lived in for a while. Um, and it's great. I loved it. And that's why it's number 5.
That's very interesting, and I have a couple of questions. The first is, okay, you didn't get, or those games didn't get translated, right?
Well,
That's
Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake didn't get
yeah.
translated.
Okay, and you had to play it in Japanese, but
A
you.
little bit, and then I stopped. Like I stopped playing it because I couldn't. They remade it again. Well, not remade it. They translated it in English, and you can get it with Metal Gear Solid 3 Subsistence, which is the kind of refined version of Solid 3.
Okay.
It's available there, and you can go play it.
And the other question is, okay, so I will assume that when you were growing up there, you got games in English mostly, right?
We got both. It's really interesting to live there because piracy was very rampant on PlayStation 1
okay.
over there.
That's
you can get
another thing
games
that
for, like,
unites gamers from from Latin America to Saudi Arabia. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So we get like copied games from, like, we get E3 demos sometimes. Like, it's that like weird.
Okay.
Sometimes you get a game that's like not complete. And it's like, why is this not complete? And it's buggy. And it's like, yeah, it's not out yet. You read
Okay.
EGM or something like that afterwards, and it says like it's not out yet. And it's like, how? I have it.
Okay, nice.
But yeah, so you sometimes I had a friend of mine who played Metal Gear Solid in Japanese before it was even out in America. And he was just like, this game is amazing. You got to play it. It's great. I finished the whole game. And it's like, it's in Japanese. And it's like, I don't care. It's so good. and he didn't know Japanese. And that was a sign for me that this is a game that I really need to play. Cool. When I played it, just the story blew my mind afterwards.
That's nice. And I have to admit that when I think about Metal Gear, I think about, like, I don't understand the story. I feel super lost. I love the cinematics. I love watching the cinematics and trying to understand what's happening, but I don't understand. And I played Metal Gear, Metal Gear Solid, Metal Gear Solid Snake, the third one, right? And Metal Gear Solid 4.
There's Solid 1, Solid 2, which is the one where you play with Raiden. And
No.
then Solid 3 is the one in the jungle.
Yeah, that's probably that's my favorite one. Yeah.
It is good. I love it. That's my second favorite one. There's also Peace Walker, which is really good. It got published on PSP.
Okay.
But it was a direct sequel to Metal Gear Solid 3.
Okay. No, I didn't play that one. Yeah.
And then Metal Gear Solid 5 was actually a sequel to Peace Walker.
Yeah, see, I to be honest, I don't remember anything.
Exactly. It's just Hideo Kojima is just being awkward and weird, and I love it. It's horrible, but it's great. And it's like watching a really cheesy 80s movie, and that's exactly what I want.
Yeah. Now, another question. Would you consider Metal Gear Rising part of the games?
It's a different game. I do love the studio though. Like Platinum Games make the best action games for me. I really love the studio. I really respect that studio a lot. And that game was great. I really loved it. It's just not it's not canon, as they say, with the story. It's not the story of, it's not an anti-nuclear like war story. It's something different.
I have to say that to me that's the best Metal Gear because I could understand what was going on. So. And
that's one of the things that I really like was very disappointing about Metal Gear Solid 5 is that it's supposed to connect you to the older games, to the ones on MSX. And it does hint, like, if you play the game and you finish the game, then why, should I say spoilers or not? I don't know.
I think the game has been out for, I don't know, 5 years, 6 years.
But
yeah.
But you'll know why you fight Big Boss twice in the first Metal Gear and the second Metal Gear on MSX. There's a reason why.
You're asking about spoilers from a game from. It. Okay, but you were worried about giving spoilers from a game from 1980 something.
Yes.
No, don't worry. I think
Well, at that time you fight Big Boss twice. You know, the first one you
Okay.
kill him, second one you kill him again, and you don't know why. Like, why is Big Boss again? Like, is around? Metal Gear
Okay.
Solid 5 explains it, and I love that they just went back and tried to explain that. But also, that game was supposed to be like 5 chapters, and they only released 2. And then there is like footage of a third one that never got completed that you can watch on YouTube. Um, and it was supposed to link up, and I think the whole thing with Konami and Kojima leaving, and the
Mhm.
bad blood there, and the sadness of Konami stopping making console games is just, it breaks my heart, because I've been with Konami since the 80s. Like,
Okay.
I love them so much, and they broke my heart. Um,
I,
yeah.
I, I kind of feel what you feel for Konami, but uh, with soccer games, with Pro Evolution soccer games. Yeah.
Plua Evolution Soccer. I used to play Winning 11 a lot.
Oh, nice, nice,
Yeah.
nice.
And before that, on Super Nintendo, I used to play Perfect 11. It was called Perfect 11 on Super Nintendo. Oh, I
Nice.
played soccer games.
Okay, you don't. I had no idea that you like that soccer game or soccer at
Well,
all.
I
So
don't play them anymore, but like, it's just what you do in Saudi Arabia. Like, you're gonna play a soccer game with your friends. Like, that's, yeah.
nice,
Nobody's like, if you want to play video games, the easiest one to just start is a soccer game.
cool, cool.
Yeah.
Nice. One last question regarding Metal Gear, and is
Sure.
did you play Death Stranding?
I am halfway through it.
Okay, okay,
Yeah. I
okay.
didn't finish it, but I like it. I like the Kojima awkwardness is there, and
Uh,
that's like, I'm into it. I love that style. I love the weirdness. Um, and it's so bad, but in a good way. Like, I don't know how to explain it. Like, it's so great.
well, as we
Um,
progress through your list, we will see your love for Kojima. So
yeah, there's
yeah,
some love
I
there.
trust you.
Um, and yeah, it's great. Like, it's definitely a different, like, it's not the same definition of what a game is, and
Yeah.
I like that. And it's relaxing. I have a good surround sound in my home and like a good HDR TV, so like, it's really relaxing to see the whole game unfold in front of you in a very relaxing manner.
Nice.
It
No,
calms me down, and I like that.
that's cool. That's cool. Yeah, I haven't played it. Probably I won't. Probably I just go to YouTube, and they released the game on PC. I think this week or last week, and
Yeah, yeah, recently.
yeah, I've been thinking like, do I want to spend 40 hours on one game, or should I spend 40 hours in like millions of other games? So
That is true.
yeah, yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you. Now to the next one, and I have to say that this is the 8th episode,
Mhm.
and there's only been one game that overlaps between two people. But your
Mhm.
next game actually is the second game that overlaps with someone else's game. So it's
Okay.
it's very interesting. I was expecting, like most people, when I started these, I was expecting like, oh, everyone is going to say Mario and is going to say like, I don't know, Fortnite, but no,
Mhm.
actually I will say like 40% of the games are games that I never played or games that I knew, but I I don't know a lot about them. But yeah, so your next game is Castlevania Symphony of the Night, also,
Yes.
by Konami from 1997, an action adventure for PlayStation. So, why this Castlevania in particular?
It's weird because there are 2 games on this list that I actually dreamt about them before. I see them in magazines and whatnot, and I never paid attention to it because it was a 2D game, and at that time it was like all about the 3D. So like,
Yeah,
2D
yeah.
games, garbage. But I read game magazines, and I there was 2 games that I like dreamt about, and I dreamt that I loved them, and I had the best gameplay experience ever. And one of them was Castlevania Symphony of the Night. I never played the older Castlevanias. I tried as a kid
Uh-huh.
to play them on different consoles. They were just too hard, too punishing, um, and just lacked something. I don't know what it is. But then I went to a game store, and I saw a friend of mine play Castlevania over there at the game store, and I was like, huh, what is this game? It's 2D. Like, I don't want to play this. But then the next couple of days, I subscribed to, there's a game shop next door to my, like close by to my house, that had a subscription service where you can rent games and just pay a monthly subscription, and then you can like rent a game for like about $4.
Was that in the States or
In Saudi Arabia.
Oh, okay. And
Yeah.
how many years ago was this?
Yeah, they were not original games. They were
No, but you already had this subscription model, so you were
yes,
way behind.
I mean, it's like
the time.
it's like the same subscription model for a video store, right? Like those were available too, and like even in the US here. But
Okay,
but I
yeah,
would just
yeah, yeah.
go and like the subscription cost is pretty much the cost of one original game. You just pay that up front, and then you're subscribed forever. It's like collateral. Think about it that way, you know?
Okay,
Um,
okay.
and so yeah, so I saw Castlevania and I saw this other game on my list, and I bought them both at the same time. And just from the beginning, the horrible voice. At that time, I didn't even understand that was really bad English. The intro of the game. I don't know if you remember, what is a man? A miserable little pile of secrets. Like that was, I did it, like I thought that was very deep at that time when I was a kid, like, oh, English is my second language. I didn't know it was not that great.
Did you get that tattooed somewhere?
Maybe I should get that tattooed or something. And but now in the newer versions, like they released them on 360 and PlayStation 3 and a bunch of other consoles, and they changed that dialogue.
They fixed the dialogue. Or they tried fixing the dialogue.
Did they? Because the horrible of it is like part of it.
And this is similar to what you mentioned about Kaijus. Those things, most of those designs are, like not art pieces, but at the same time, they are art pieces because of, it's weird to explain, but okay.
Exactly. Yeah,
sorry.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. But yeah, that game had amazing music, had really tight gameplay. I love Japanese RPGs, and it combined Japanese RPG elements with side scrollers, and it had this huge castle that you can explore, and then you realize that that's only half of the game. And when you finish the game and you tell your friends you finished it, and then somebody tells you like, no, you didn't, and blows your mind that there's another half of the game that you haven't played. It's the amount of content in that game, the music, the design, everything about that game was great. I fell in love with vampires after that. I'm a little goth kid deep inside,
Okay.
Like if I grew up in America, I'll be definitely goth. And but at that time, like there's no goth kids over there in Saudi Arabia. Now maybe, but at that time there wasn't. And but yeah, I fell in love with vampires. I loved the music. I loved pipe organ after that. I just became a fan. And yeah, I just fell in love with those style of games afterwards. Any game that Igarashi does, like since then, I played, and I've enjoyed every one of them. I bought a Nintendo DS, and the Game Boy Advance, and the Nintendo DS just for Castlevania games, and Mega Man games. But yeah, like I loved Symphony of the Night so much. It's still, I think, even if people play it now, I think it still holds up, and it's still a really, really good game.
I've never played this Castlevania. I knew about it, but I was, when I saw like, okay, this is a PlayStation game, I was expecting a 3D Castlevania game, similar to the ones from, I think, Xbox 360. I don't remember. Like, I was expecting that, and then I saw this, and I was like, it's great because it doesn't feel old. This could actually be a game that was released like last month or something, like an indie game or something like that. So in retrospective, and you mentioned this before, like we were all about 3D games, but those games now they look kind of like, it's not as good as I remembered. But these
Yeah.
games are like, okay, they still hold up, but they don't look old. And if anything, there's one part of the gameplay that I've seen where you are like too close to the borders of the castle, so you can see the sky moving. Uh,
Yes. Yeah.
it looks beautiful. So
It does look beautiful.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's
It's
just
great.
yeah, it's magical. It's great. The particle effects are really good when you're changing different forms. Um, yeah, it's good. The weapons, all the combination of weapons that you can have, it's just really good. And Alucard is just a really cool character. Yeah.
Is he the same character from the first Castlevanias? They have the
No,
same
he
name.
was
I think.
he was in Castlevania Bloodlines, which I think was the one on Sega Genesis,
Okay.
where you play with Simon Belmont, with Elena. I think she's a sorceress,
Mm,
and Alucard, and you're supposed to defeat Dracula. They made the Castlevania animated show on Netflix is based on that one.
okay. I watched
Uh,
that one. It was fun.
yeah,
It was fun. Well
yeah,
animated.
it's really
I
good.
think.
Season 2 is really good too.
Oh, is
But
that
season
out
2 was
yet?
not based on any of the video games. Season 1 was based on Bloodlines.
Okay. Cool.
Um,
Yeah.
and then after that, after I played that amazing game, you want more Castlevania, so you play Castlevania 64, and it's one of the worst games in the history of all video games.
Yeah.
Uh,
I
so I
also
stuck
did.
to 2D after that.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. You were smart. That's another question. So you were both a PlayStation and N64 and Dreamcast. I guess it was Dreamcast player, or you just had one
Mhm.
console, or you were like a rich kid and had
Well,
all the consoles.
I was lucky that I had what's it called? I had like right now I have four like three brothers, but at that time I had two, one older, one younger. So when I was older, um, every, in Muslim culture in general, there is a celebration called Eid that happens after Ramadan. That's the first Eid.
Mm,
It's two celebrations that you can have, right? It's kind of like Christmas. It's a
okay.
religious holiday, and the first Eid is where older people give young kids like money, right? As
Okay.
like, kind of like gifts, but instead like they give them money.
Nice.
And I had an uncle who was really, really well off. So every year he would give me like enough to like fund half of a PlayStation, or some like half of a
Nice.
console. So I would like save up my money in my whole year, and then he would like give me the other half, and I would
Okay.
go and buy a console every time it comes out. So I had a Genesis. My older brother, well, before that, I had an MSX. It was like for the whole family. But then I had a Genesis. My brother had a Nintendo before that, and he got a Super Nintendo. And then I got a PlayStation. My younger brother got the 64, and he also got the Dreamcast.
Cool. Cool.
And I got the PlayStation 2.
Nice.
um, so we alternated, like each person would like buy one at 1 year, and we'd all play. And
Do
so
you
yeah,
still
so that's
keep those consoles? Like, or did you have
no,
to sell
no,
them?
sadly, I was too young, and I just got rid of all of them. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been the same thing
Also, I
too.
think my mom once picked up a Neo Geo, or like the big cartridges and everything, from
Mhm.
like a flea market in Saudi Arabia for like nothing. And so for a
Okay.
while, I had like a Neo Geo with a whole bunch of games. So I really got into like fighting games because of that. Um,
I have another question there. Those flea markets, or
mhm.
those the main places where you will buy video games, or were video games available like right now? Everywhere or every country I've been to, you can find like the local GameStop kind of thing. But when I was
Yeah.
younger, you could not get most games, and like it established business. You had to buy them at flea markets or at like
Mm.
bazaars or things like that. Was it similar there?
Sometimes there is that. I mean, no, there were some stores that were legitimate that had like original copies of
Hmm.
the games, and they're still available until now. They're there and they
Okay.
exist and they have their reputation to uphold, and they you know they also have like Pokemon card, like it's just like a GameStop, right? Like
Hmm.
they
Hmm.
have all the things.
Yeah.
um and there are ones where just like, yeah, they just crank out pirated CDs, movies, games, whatever you want, like they'll just
Yeah.
give you a catalog and you just look through the catalog and tell them I want C4, and they'll just go grab it from next door. They're cracking down a lot on things like that. Like in Saudi Arabia, you can't find pirated games anymore. And I mean, in general, it's really hard to pirate games right now.
Yeah, and I don't know. I also don't want to say something because yeah, but sometimes it's like subscribing to like Game Pass or
Mhm,
PlayStation Plus, or even finding deals on Steam.
mhm.
It's pretty cheap, right? Like
Yes, yeah.
uh, or even playing on your phone. You can spend literally your entire life playing games and not having to pay anything now.
Yeah,
So
I think there's no excuse for piracy. At that time, it was just like the market was just not served, and people who did import the games just sold them for a lot more money than
yeah,
they're
yeah,
worth.
yeah, yeah.
But now that we see that like piracy went down in Arabic countries, and now you see a lot of AAA games being subtitled or dubbed completely in Arabic, which is great to see. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, like that's what happens when you support the industry and you pay for the games. You
Yeah.
see them support you back.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And sorry, another question, but I think to me it's important to get these answers. Um,
Mhm.
is it common for kids, like young kids in Saudi Arabia, to speak English? Like you learn that in school, or how something
Not,
like
yeah,
that?
we learn it since middle school.
Hmm.
I was lucky to go to a school because my family both studied their college in the U.S.
Okay.
So they wanted to make sure that I speak English at a young age. So I learned Arabic and English at the same time.
Hmm. Okay.
Um, and and I was also born in the U.S., but I only spent like 2 years here, so I don't really remember much.
Okay.
And when when I was growing up, they made sure that I learned English at a young age and put me in schools that did teach extra courses of English since elementary school. Um, but not everybody's as lucky. I'm
Yeah.
definitely privileged because of that. It gave me access to a lot more information around the world and on the internet. But most people do not speak English well.
I
They
see.
can get by, they understand some words, but yeah, they don't understand English very well. So a lot of them don't have access to that.
Okay. No, and my question was because how something like getting games in your native language can make
Mhm.
someone enjoy something more, right? Like not
Yeah.
having to say like, "Oh, I didn't quite understand what that person said." And unlike movies or some like a book where you can like pause and go to a book, in games there might be places where you simply just lost one comment or something like that because you don't speak.
Yeah.
So this the fact, as you said, that you get these games in your language, in your native language, is great because I used to think that yeah, everybody in the games industry has to speak English, right? And it kind of makes sense, but I now also think like yeah, that's true. If you, at least today, if you want to make games, most of the tools you will get more information if you know English. That's the
Yeah.
reality, right? But also as a consumer, you you have the right to get stuff in your language, right?
Mhm.
You have the right of
Yeah.
saying like, and then the same for me, like in Spanish. Sometimes you just want to relax and not have that extra processing thing in your brain trying to understand something else. So yeah,
Yeah. That's one of the biggest struggles when trying to like create a community of game developers there, is that, yeah, there's some people who know how to program, but all the resources are in English. All the
Mm,
blogs, all the tech
yeah.
that's out there is in English. There's some in Japanese and Korean, just because that market is there. It existed before the US developing video games,
Yeah.
so they have their own ecosystem. But in Arabic, there's not, that doesn't exist. So you either have to get the resources in East Asian languages or in English. And it was hard because I was trying to translate a lot of them for the
Hmm.
game developers and tried to make it accessible, but it just changes so fast that every
Yeah.
time you
Yeah.
you translate something, it changed already. So I just started telling developers, like, you need to learn English. Like, it's sad, and I wish it wasn't the case. But it is a reality of the industry a little bit. But I'm glad that now game developers are making games in Arabic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ghost of
So,
Tsushima is in Arabic. Spider-Man was in Arabic, and they try different accents. They try to really localize it. Some of the people that I worked with are the people who worked on the Uncharted series to make it in Arabic. Um, so it's cool to see that they're giving care to providing content in local languages.
that's
But
that's
hopefully
that's
one day even developing languages, and
yeah, and
developer
yeah,
tools become
or
available.
one day like automatic translations will be like good enough where you can simply just say
Yeah.
translate this, and there won't be, I could be speaking Spanish and communicating with whoever,
Yeah. It's
but
gonna be like Star Trek all over.
yeah. That's the dream. So yeah, cool. So next to next game,
Sure.
this game is one of those games that I had no idea existed, and probably people watching this video will say like, "Oh, Arturo, you're a fake gamer, a fake developer," and probably I am, but I had no idea about this game. The first time, my first approach with this game was because of you.
Mhm.
So it's interesting, but I have to say that the game has one of the most beautiful covers that I've seen, and it's very simple. It's basically just a title, but I love the cover. So the next
Uh-huh.
game is Illusion of Gaia, uh,
Yes.
published by Nintendo in the US, by Enix in Japan. The developer is Quintet, or
Yeah.
Quintet, yeah. From 1994, is an RPG for Super Nintendo. So
Hmm.
sell me this game because, yeah, this is new
All
to
right.
me.
Imagine a 2D Zelda game that is takes a lot from like Incas, like the Incan culture, and
Okay.
creates like a myth, like based on the myth, like it's not based, but it takes a lot from Inca, like Incan mythology
Yeah.
and culture, and mixes it with some European and sci-fi and um, and Japanese anime,
Okay.
and in a 2D Zelda kind of package. Um, so I got introduced as a kid to the Inca culture through that game. And I loved watching my brother um, Zelda Link to the Past.
Hmm.
And he had the Super Nintendo, so I always have to watch him. I'm not allowed to play it, so I just watched my older brother play Zelda. And then afterwards, I'm just like, which next game we're gonna play? Like I want to watch you play another game, and that's the next game he got. And it was a 2D Zelda with a lot more involved story. The story is very deep. It's very colorful, very diverse, and it's just a climactic, dark story. Also, there's a lot of elements there that was just like shocking to me. Like, people die, and people you think like you care about like die, and you didn't see that in Zelda, you know.
Yeah.
And but it had the same style. Like, the top down games always have a special place in my heart. Like, I love Hyper Light Drifter. I like the new Zelda remake that they just did, of Wind Waker, not Wind Waker,
Link to the
uh
past.
Link's Awakening.
Oh, Link's Awakening. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Link Between Worlds. Like, I love those top down Zelda style games. And but this one is my favorite. It had a vampire, it had it had everything.
Yeah.
It's great. vampire, Incan culture, a comet coming over to destroy the world. It has a knight. It had a ball of energy that has an energy sword. It's great. And
Was this game like long to beat, or is it a long game?
it's maybe nowadays with like how good we are at playing games and uh maybe it will take you like 10 to 20 hours.
Well, I would
Yeah.
consider that. I mean, it's not like a 100-hour game, but
No, it's not. It's not. That's the thing. I don't play those games anymore. Like I can't play a game that's 100 hours.
yeah,
I need a game that has a story that ends. Like
Yeah.
that's it.
yeah. I lean towards those games lately as well, because it's hard. There are so many great things coming out every day
Mhm.
that you want to try as many as possible. So
Yeah, I like games with stories. I don't know if you noticed that.
yeah,
It's
and vampires.
it's yeah, and vampires. And it's yeah, like I love consuming stories in general. Like that was always my thing, and I always enjoyed those stories. And Castlevania had that too, by the way. Like it had like a deeper mythology that it's like build off of. It's like all the older games that you have to like go back and learn about these older games and realize like where the history of this game that you just played. Um, and that was Castlevania, and that was also Metal Gear was kind of like that too. Illusion of Gaia, though, it's great. It's just like a basic gameplay that is done very well.
Yeah,
It's like playing an Uncharted game. Like it's not groundbreaking with game mechanics, but it does the basics really, really well.
And it's also beautiful. When I was doing research for this game, I double checked, like, is this really a Super Nintendo game? Because it looks impressive. It's too many sprites rendered on screen. So many like effects, animation effects. But yeah, I was blown away by this game. I wish my first impression of this game was when it was released or when I was younger, because if today I feel like, wow, this is amazing, Arturo from the past will have like gone crazy about the graphics. So yeah.
One of the one of the things about this game that makes me like reminisce about it so much is that my brother had a fight with me like before he finished the game, so he didn't allow me to watch the ending of the game.
And you until this day you don't know the ending.
No, I waited until I was in college and played it on an emulator, and I just like sent him like pictures of me finishing the game, and I'm just like, take that, you know.
Nice. And are your brothers like in the games industry or not at all?
No, he's in real estate in Saudi Arabia right now. He was a banker, and now he's in real estate. Stopped playing games around that time. Like that's the time where he just like lost interest in playing games.
And what does your family thinks about you being in games?
Oh, they thought I was crazy my whole year, like my whole life. They thought I was wasting my time, and but that was like a thing for me to prove them wrong. You know, like a lot of Middle Eastern families, you know, they either want you to be an engineer, a doctor, or a disappointment. So that's so I became an engineer. I did my computer science, you know, but I stuck to it. I knew what I wanted, and I chose my path. And only after they saw me on TV once, they're like, okay, we respect what you're doing.
What were you doing on TV?
Because I had my startup, and I was like one of the few people who had like a game business, like anything related to games.
Nice.
So I became an expert in Saudi Arabia, like related to game development. That was the source of expertise there for a bit. Nice. I was the only one. I'm not saying I'm the best, but like I was the only one at that time.
That's good. Like you're the you can be the best one, you can be the worst one, but you're the only one. Nice.
I am me, and that's most important.
Yeah. Okay, so now to the next game, and I I have to say that also. This game is a game that I haven't played. I knew about the game because I remember also when I was younger, I'm not going to say I was a kid. I remember seeing like in magazines, and this is another question I have for you. In Mexico, and yeah, in Mexico during the 90s and 2000s, the video games magazine industry was big. Like there were,
Hmm.
I would say, like more than 20 different
Oh
magazines
wow.
taking place, like Electronic Gaming Monthly and Atomics and
Uh-huh.
Club Nintendo and so many other magazines about video games. I
Hmm.
actually think like that business was bigger than the actual games business back then. But I remember seeing like Xenogears and seeing like screenshots.
Hmm.
At the magazines, but I never felt like, oh, I want to play the game. And
Hmm.
actually, until this day, you're the first person that I know that said like, oh, Xenogears is my favorite game. And now, before jumping
That's
into Xenogears, what's your story with the video games magazines? Did you used to read them,
ah
or you just didn't? I'm
yeah,
just curious.
yeah. Like I used to read a lot of them. Um, I used to I used to buy a couple of different ones. I used to like Game Pro.
Okay.
We used to get them over there, but they used to be censored. If you remember game marketing in the 90s, it was pretty sexist and
Hmm.
pretty bad. And
Okay.
so Saudi Arabian censors used to like use like black marker to like cover things up and then sell them. So I used to get Game Pro, I used to get EGM, I used to get tips and tricks. I rarely got tips and tricks. And then I got PSM. PSM was really nice because they had the last page of that magazine had just a bunch of drawings, like fan art,
Nice. Yeah,
and I
yeah, yeah.
love that. And that's when I like started doing fan art. Like I started drawing like anime characters and stuff like that during that time because I really loved fan art. Um,
Nice, nice,
there
nice.
wasn't a lot of outlets in Saudi Arabia to really learn and progress more with art, so I never really developed that skill. Like I'm an okay, like I can draw some things, but not in a professional manner at all. But it was because of that like those magazines inspired me to like draw things and learn more about the game industry that way.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
after that, I got the internet, like late 90s. That's
yeah,
it. It's
yeah, yeah, yeah.
There
And
was one magazine in Arabic called الألعاب الإلكترونية, electronic games, and
uh-huh.
it was great. Like going back and seeing those, uh, like they did real good, like a really good job doing journalism during that time, and it was like really early on, and I didn't like appreciate how important that was until it was gone. I don't know
Yeah.
what happened to those people, but yeah.
I also have to say that these magazines. Well, we were talking about the game showcase from yesterday from
Hmm.
Microsoft, and you are watching these things live at the same time as journalists from around the
Yeah.
world. So it's
Yeah.
great. But I remember back in the 90s or something, the excitement of not knowing, just knowing like there's this thing called E3, and
Hmm.
something amazing is happening, but you don't know
Yeah.
what's happening, and you have to wait not only for the next issue of the magazine, because the next issue was the issue before E3, so you will have to
Yeah.
wait two issues to see
Yeah.
what was announced. And I remember the expectation was so cool, not knowing what was going to happen. But yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I
Anyway,
don't know. I don't know if you remember the Game Pro with like when Unreal got unveiled, and it's like, look at these graphics,
yeah,
Unreal. Like looking at that, it's just like, oh god.
yeah,
But at the
yeah,
same time, that was amazing. Like looking at that
yeah.
as a kid was just that was
Yeah,
everything. That was my world.
yeah, absolutely. And just a side note, from the magazines that you mentioned, we used to get those in Mexico, except GamePro. We didn't get those.
Huh.
So yeah, and actually, many of the magazines there were like licensed, so
Uh,
they will have like a translated version. Like Electronic Gaming Monthly will have, like, I would say, like 60% translated content, 40%
mhm.
original content. So, but yeah, but GamePro was, you could get the English version, but it was just too expensive. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, something that
No,
was.
we got the English ones. Saudi Arabia is great at that time because it had no like import tax.
Oh, okay.
Import tax is like just really small, especially if you bring small quantities, and not there's no big demand for English magazines, so
I see.
it was reasonably priced over there. One of the magazines actually that I got was the official PlayStation magazine,
Okay. Okay.
and that one had one of the discs one day. It was just it always had a demo disc, and that one issue had the Square Enix demo on it, and it had Brave Fencer Musashi, it had Parasite
Oh,
Eve, it had
yeah.
Xenogears, and it had Bushido Blade. Those
Nice.
were in one demo disc. That year was amazing for games. And yeah, and that's how I also like played Xenogears uh, before
Playing the game.
I like yeah before I actually bought it.
Nice.
Um,
Which
yeah,
is
and
great.
Xenogears was like the great
Sorry.
segue, right?
Yeah,
I
great segue
I
to
planned
actually
it.
talk about Xenogears. Yeah.
Yeah, it's Xenogears is the second game where I dreamt about the game, and then I played the demo, and I'm just like, this is everything I ever wanted. Um, and it had anime characters. I was really into anime at that time. Anime characters, martial arts, giant robots, and at the beginning of the game, you see the like a bad guy in the game tell you, "Let's kill God." And as a conservative young kid in Saudi Arabia, I'm just like, "Oh my god, am I supposed to play this game?" It was, but it was like the naughty game that I'm like playing. It had ended up being just. It's a buggy mess, by the way. Not buggy necessarily. It's yeah, it's not the tightest game, but it's also slow. Opening up the menus takes a while. It's just not the most polished game. Also, the second half of the game was just pretty much text because they ran out of budget. um so it was just like this happened, this happened, this happened, cutscene, and then like a boss fight. And then so but even with that, it was 70 hours of gameplay. um and
Don't you miss the times where you could invest that much time in a game without worrying
yeah,
about doing
I
other stuff?
know, I know, it's, responsibilities,
Yeah,
um
yeah. And
social life, what is that,
yeah. Speaking of anime, what anime did you watch when you were a kid?
Um, let's see. I used to like, so when I was a really young kid, we got a lot of anime from the 70s, translated into Arabic.
Okay.
So there is Grendizer, which is like a mecha anime that was designed by the creator of Devilman, if you know Devilman.
Hmm. I kind of, it kind of rings a bell, but no.
There's
Wait.
a new one. There's a new
Yeah.
Devilman on Netflix, which
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
good.
That's what I. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
but it's like from the 70s. Like it's
Okay.
old.
I didn't know.
It's but yeah, but Grendizer was a mecha one. It was really popular in the Middle East and France and Italy for some reason.
Okay.
Even in Spain, I think. Um, and I watched something called Sanshiro. Prowler Sanshiro, I think that's what it's called in Japanese, and it's about a kid who creates his own like robot, and they all battle it, and like they program these robots, and then they take him to arenas, and they have like fights in the arena with these like small robots. But he's like a genius kid who designed his own robot, didn't like buy anything off the shelf, and programmed him himself. And his grandfather is like a judo fighter, so he like put his judo like knowledge in there. And then anime stuff happened. Military gets involved. It's a lot of drama.
Yeah, okay.
But I like that aesthetic of like mechas from the 80s and like in like 70s. The one that I'm probably going to mention that you might know of is Captain Tsubasa.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is I think it's called Super Campeones.
It is.
South
Yeah.
America, right?
Yeah. It is. It is super. I didn't know about anime, or I didn't know that was anime.
Me too. Yeah.
And it was like, oh, this is so cool. It has soccer. It's just 2D characters on screen. So this is yeah. What was the name? Because Captain
In Arabic
Tsubasa.
it was called Captain Majid, but in Japanese it's called Captain Tsubasa.
Yeah.
And they just released a new one, by the way. They remade the first kind of arc, or two arcs. They remade them last year in 2018 or 2019. 2019.
Okay.
But it's available right now, and you can like find it probably on Crunchyroll. Or
that's interesting, because a couple of weeks ago I learned, I think for PlayStation there's a Captain Tsubasa game
on Switch.
It's on Switch. Okay. Yeah,
maybe it's on the place. Maybe it's on all the systems. I don't know, but I've seen it on the Switch.
Yeah, maybe it's on Switch. Yeah, I don't remember, but it was like, oh, cool. One of these games that is not because there's, or probably there are more than one, but trading card games on mobile devices.
Yeah.
With
I played that one for a bit.
Yeah, and it's like, yeah, cool, but this is not what I want to play, like a FIFA or Pro Evolution Soccer with these characters. That's what I want. Yeah. But anyway,
there's a PlayStation 1 game that's Captain Tsubasa that's kind of like that, and I played that one a lot. But it was all in Japanese, and I couldn't understand anything. Yeah. So I just like learned the basics. Like learned what this word means shoot, this word means whatever.
Oh, that's good.
They actually also made those games on NES. They made two of them, Captain Tsubasa 1 and 2 on NES. Those were really popular in the Middle East, and I learned all the commands. It was kind of like an RPG where every time you meet somebody, it's like an encounter, and you choose either to tackle or to shoot or whatever. And I learned like what are the moves and like what does this mean? This means shoot. This means whatever. And I learned just the shape of the letters, and did that game. Also, those games have an amazing soundtrack, and the composer is actually working with a friend of mine in Kuwait who has a game music company now called Brave Wave, and they like remake a lot of these like 8-bit music and stuff like that. Cool. And I think he's the same composer who did Ninja Gaiden, also like the original soundtrack.
The Super NES Ninja Gaiden.
Yes. So yeah, like if you want more of those, got to plug in my friend's stuff,
Yeah. No. That's great.
Yeah. Brave Wave is an amazing music label, and they do a lot of cool stuff with. They work with like a lot of the great composers in the game industry, including Chip Zell and other ones around the world.
Nice. Nice. So that's Xenogears, or that's everything but Xenogears. This conversation. No.
So Xenogears, it was like a Japanese RPG.
Yeah.
I really loved. I hated turn-based RPGs until I played Super Mario RPG, the first one on Super Nintendo, and then I just became hooked on Japanese RPGs. I played Wild Arms on the next one that I played after Super Mario RPG was Wild Arms on PlayStation 1, and then Suikoden, and then Final Fantasy 7, and then I got Xenogears, and just it was just a great era for Japanese RPGs. And then Tales of Destiny 1 was also out during that time. It was a great time. It was a great time for Japanese RPGs. But that game had like a really cool combo mechanic where you can do really cool actions. If you're battling as a human, you can do a lot of cool martial art moves. And like chain them together, and you can discover new ones by like trying new combos. It was really cool. And then as giant robots, you can like put different like parts into the robots, and you got fuel you got to manage, and it's yeah, it's cool. It has the kaiju feeling to it, as well as martial arts, as well as a story that involves religion um, and humanity, like crashing into this planet. At the beginning of the game, there's this cutscene, anime cutscene, about like a spaceship that like crashes into a planet, and then they never talk about it for like all of the game until at the end you're just like, ah, okay, that makes sense. um and it's great. It's amazing. Also has like politics, really heavy on politics, because there's these people who live in this like utopian society, and they don't care about like humans, and to me it was just like, that's America. They don't care about the rest of the world, like, and stuff. Like, in my mind as a kid, like that was kind of like what I was imagining things and like linking it to my world and how I lived and how I saw the world. um yeah, that game was very influential for me, and it has a place in my heart forever.
Nice. And now the two questions regarding this.
Also, the soundtrack. Oh my God. Yasunori Mitsuda is the best musician for games that ever existed. He also did Chrono Trigger.
Uh-huh.
So it's amazing. The soundtrack is great.
Well, two things regarding what you just said. Uh, well, why, um, what happened to these franchises with Illusion of Gaia and Xenogears? I
I
don't
think
think
Illusion of Gaia just died.
okay.
Like, just they never made a sequel. I think the company just made a bunch of other games, but I think they became part of Sega for a while and then just like didn't do anything and just disappeared.
Mm,
Um, Xenogears actually has a really interesting story. So the studio that did it became called Monolith Studios.
okay.
They moved uh, from Square Enix, and Namco bought them. So they tried to do Xenosaga. So Xenogears was supposed to be episode 5
Uh-huh.
of Xeno Universe.
Okay.
And so when they moved to Namco, they released Xenosaga episode 1, and to me it was like, oh, this is it. They're gonna bring it up all the way up to 5, and then they're gonna remake Xenogears. No, there's a lot. It's a different game, and they were not as good.
But they are related, Xenosaga and Xenogears?
They're I feel like they wanted them to be related.
Okay.
They really did. And there was a lot of elements that are still there. There is like how you save your games, kind of the same symbol. Some of the characters, like you see them pop up, like, in not flashbacks, but just like foreshadowing, I guess. And you're just like, yes, they're gonna be an episode 5, and it's gonna be Xenogears, and it's gonna be amazing. And yeah, the first one didn't do well. The second one really didn't do well, and I think Namco by that time just told them, just end it, just stop.
Okay.
um
Okay.
and yeah, that studio also created a bunch of cool games. They created Baton Kaitos on GameCube, really good Japanese RPG. Also, they also created I think they moved to Nintendo recently, and they have been contributing to the Zelda 3D games.
Interesting.
So I think Skyward Sword was developed by them or co-developed by them. The last one, Skyward Sword, Twilight Princess, and Breath of the Wild was all
Hmm.
like their team was heavily involved in that. They
That's
also
very
did
interesting.
Xenoblade, and Xenoblade Chronicles, Xenoblade Chronicles X, and Xenoblade 2. So that studio still exists. They're the ones who like they're working on Zeldas,
Okay.
and it's a great, like, it's a studio that's like, I'm so glad it's alive. That
Okay.
studio is doing amazing things.
And up until this moment, I knew about these titles, right? Like Xenogears,
Mhm.
Xenosaga, Xenoverse. I never stopped to think, oh, maybe they are related, or
Maybe.
related, or developed by the same people, or anything, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it was not, and
No,
I
there's a bunch of other Xeno games that are not them. Um,
okay, okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I have to say that when you sent me your original list of games,
Hmm.
um, I think it was like, I don't know, 20 games.
Hmm.
I probably knew two or three of those games. Like most of them probably are like Japanese RPGs that
Hmm.
never came to America or something, because I was like, man, this is gonna be difficult because I don't know anything about these games. Maybe Abdullah is just making random games or something because, uh, but
I'm just
yeah,
here to confuse you, you know?
yeah. But yeah, it's great having this conversation and understanding like, okay, so you have this influence of these type of games that in reality were not the types of games that I've been playing through my life, but it's great to, at least visiting them through YouTube and seeing like, oh wow, until this moment, I know what a Xenogears is, or how it looks, or how it plays, and yeah, it's great. And now we've been talking about so many random things: kaijus, vampires, soccer,
Hmm.
piracy, all these things. But I can guarantee you that this weirdness doesn't prepare anyone for your next game.
I'm so excited to talk about it.
Yeah, so I have to say that I knew that Hideo Kojima had this weird first game, but I was like, yeah, I know something about that, but I
Hmm.
I didn't know which game was this one. Uh, so the game is Penguin Adventure
Yes.
from Konami, published by Konami, developed by Konami in the '87, which is the year that I was born. Which
Okay.
is cool. It's a platformer action adventure game, and also I have to say that probably is amongst the first runners. It's
Yeah.
uh, it's great. So tell me about Penguin Adventure, please.
Okay. So the MSX, I have to talk about the MSX because I love the MSX so much.
Okay.
It's a computer that is designed by Microsoft Japan,
Mm,
actually, and in the 80s to try to standardize the computer industry in Japan.
okay.
It's not, they never made the hardware, but they just made the schematics available to other developers. The one that I got in Saudi Arabia was made by Panasonic, but localized by a local company, and they made like an Arabic version of it and all of that. Um, and but yeah, but in Japan you can find one that's made by Toshiba. There's ones that are made by Philips, I think. There's like just NEC, I think, made one too. You can find multiple ones of these. And I have a friend of mine in Saudi Arabia that collects all the rare ones.
Okay.
And there are collectors around the world who collect these rare MSX devices. There's different editions too. There's MSX 1, 2, 2 Plus, and just one last R, I think, MSX R or something like that. So, think about it as, you know, the different, and they're all backward compatible. Like the newer ones are backward compatible. But I
Okay.
think that what I had was the MSX 1, and Penguin Adventure, and Konami made all of their games available for like, that's where Konami started making the games. The first Metal Gear was on it. The first Gradius was on it. Um, and Penguin Adventure was like the Konami mascot at that time. That penguin was the mascot of Konami on
Okay.
the MSX. Um, there's the MSX had like two cartridge slots too, so you can put like a cheat device on the second cartridge slot, and that would unlock like different things in the game. So yeah,
Was that like a Game
Penguin
Shark
Adventure was
type
the
of thing?
game. It's the original Game Shark. It was called like Game Master.
Okay.
But also, if you put like Qbert on the next slot, then you get like secret things in some games, and like just there's like weird things like that.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
Um, and so Penguin Adventure is about this penguin, walking into the horizon. You see his back. It's like a third person camera,
Yeah.
uh, and and uh, um, and you just keep going. You can change your speed, and you can go left and right, and you can jump. Um, and you collect fish. Fish for some reason flies from holes on the ground, and you have to like collect them. And once you collect the fish, you have to you can buy things with them because fish is currency in this world, and it's
Okay.
great. And sometimes you're walking around and you fall into a hole, and these small little holes, the smaller ones, actually lead to shops, and you can find like these Santa Claus people
Hmm.
over there. One of them
Yeah.
is mean, and he's like, charges you a lot of money, and the other one is like super nice and like gives you a fair price.
Okay.
But also you can gamble there. You can like put fish into a slot machine and then get more fish out of it. And you can buy things like a hat that makes you jump faster, a feather that makes you change direction when you're jumping, a gun, because penguins need guns, and an armor, 3 different shoes. Like there are so many items in this game that you can buy. And the whole story is that the princess, Pinguette, I think that's what's her name's called,
Mhm.
is dying, and you need to go grab the golden apple and then come all the way back and give it to her. And it's just a really really hard game. And sometimes you see a pair of wings and you take them and they take you to outer space, and you find fish in outer space because you're a penguin in space collecting fish. Makes sense. Um, and some levels are underwater, some of them are in caves and arctic like places, and it's like a really really deep game. And the cool thing about the game that I realized this about it like this week, there's 2 endings to the game. And either you reach the princess and she's dead, or you reach the princess and she's alive, like you give her the apple and everything is fine. And it depends on how many times you pause the game. There was no save files during that time. Like
Mhm.
sometimes you pause the game overnight and you come over and play the game again to finish it. It's so long. And it's so hard. And yeah, it's one of the first games that I've ever seen had like 2 endings to it. Um, but the cool thing, but also the music, if you like chiptune, the music on a lot of the Konami games on the MSX are just fantastic. Um, there's another game called Nightmare, also with a K.
Uh,
Great music. But yeah, just all Konami games on the MSX just had amazing chiptune. Um, and and with Penguin Adventure, it's just one of those games where it was so hard for me as a kid that I could never finish it. So I would have to wait every week. We would have a family reunion every week.
mhm.
Um, so my cousins would meet with my cousins, and they would bring their MSX, or there was always an MSX in everybody's house. Like there was one.
Okay. Yeah.
And because it had educational games also in Arabic, so like families bought them. Um, and
I guess for kids,
uh,
that's always the way to tell your parents you to
yeah,
get you internet or to get you like something like games, because you can promise them like, oh, but I will learn English if you buy me this game because the games are in
yes.
English. Okay, yeah, here have this thing. So
Exactly, yeah.
it's good.
um so yeah, so like I have to wait for my cousins to come over. They're older, like 5 years older. And they would play the game, and like all the kids would just like be stuck to the TV. Like we're like 20 kids, like stuck to the TV, the whole family and extended family sitting around the TV and watching the eldest, like play the game and like win it, and we never saw the good ending because we
Okay.
just like, because when the parents call you, you pause the game. Like
Yeah, yeah.
this is just a thing. And yeah, so like we paused the game a lot, and I didn't realize that that's how you get judged and get given the ending based on how many times you pause the game. Um, I
That's
thought it was based on time for the longest time, because there's shortcuts and like secret shortcuts in the game. And I tried taking all the shortcuts and all those things, and I still got the bad ending when I got older and I managed to play the game.
yeah.
But yeah, in Arabic countries right now, you just say the Penguin game and everybody knows what it is, and it's one of those games that have a deep history. in my childhood. And but at the same time, like it was one of Kojima's first games. It's not his game, like he wasn't like in control of the game, but it was the first game he worked on.
It's not like Penguin Adventure, a Hideo Kojima game or something.
No,
He was not the author as that he is today.
I think Snatcher was his first one that he did. Also on the MSX, I think, or NES. I'm not sure. But yeah, but also I found out also this week, I was like researching to make sure that I refresh my information for this podcast. In Metal Gear Solid 4, Sunny, the little girl, was playing with a Vita, PlayStation Vita. And if you zoom in on it, she was playing Penguin Adventures.
Ah, nice.
It's great. It's like, yes, my childhood is validated.
Well, I have to say that again, I didn't know about this game. When you mentioned this and you mentioned like, oh, it's a Kojima game, I also was like, well, yeah, we all start from something, right? Like, and that's something that I tell most young creators when they want to make games, that, well, you should start with something small. You should start with something that is not extremely complex. So by the time I think making something like this will be super complex, right? But for today's standards, doing something like this might not be that hard. But I have to say that the game, being 2D but playable in 3D, looks impressive, right? And it reminded me also. I'm not sure if you played The Lion King on Super NES as well. The Stampede level.
Yes.
Up until this day, I'm like, how did they do that? How did they make you feel that it was 3D when in reality? And now you understand, like, okay, they probably scale the sprites or they do something like this. But at that time, my brain couldn't process the fact that I was seeing that 2D game in 3D. Yeah. So something like this back in those days, also, and this is judging by YouTube videos, right? But it looks like super fast. And
the frame rate is really fast. And like compared to other games on the MSX, the background really was really choppy in a lot of these games. Like it just really like it would refresh once a second, like it was 1 frame per second for the backgrounds to refresh while it's scrolling. And this thing is like almost like, I think it's 30 frames per second, or it's like 24 probably, but like it was high enough refresh rate, and that was very impressive.
Yeah. And I really wish I really wish like I could play this in an actual console just to see, because judging by the video, it feels like it's also like super responsive and things like that. Yeah, and in many cases, games like these with so many things happening so fast were not as responsive, right? Like, and especially 2D games, because that's another thing that you learn that 2D games in most cases require a lot of processing and memory, because you're actually not tricking the computer. The computer has to have in memory like large files, large textures, and move them around. Unlike 3D, where you can make some tricks to make it like more faster. But in 2D, it's impressive. So yeah, it's great. Also back to the point of runners, right? It's a runner. Did you play Pepsi Man?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
So that's what a lot of people like Pepsi Man, because it reminded them of Penguin Adventure also.
Really? Okay. Yeah. That's also part of the culture. I have a friend from Brazil who doesn't know about Pepsi Man. I'm not sure if it's only him. But part of the Mexican culture is, I would say, Pepsi Man. I don't know why. And it's funny. I can't guarantee you that not many people in Mexico knows about this game. But it's interesting that for you, this is part of like your culture and your childhood. And to me, it's like, okay, this is a random game by Kojima or Konami, but it's impressive. I'm also looking at the game and seeing like a space level where you have the you're floating in space, and yeah, it's crazy. It's
It's
impressive.
ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's
It's
like a
ridiculous.
bullet hell. It becomes like a bullet hell kind of game
Yeah.
too. Like after a while, like the later levels just become all over the place. Like it's chaos, and you're so fast, but you have to like slow down, and there's a timer to finish the level, or else you die. So you got to do it fast. But yeah, it's very deep. I was like looking back at this, I was like, this is not how they made games. You look all the other games that like are on that system, and a lot of them are basic shooters. And this game is like, no, this is a lot deeper. There's a store, there's gambling, like to make money, like they had like
Mhm.
the randomness factor to it. um and different paths, you can take like different paths and shortcuts and cheats, and it's impressive. It's
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah. And I guess there's no sequel to this game, or
Also, there's
they.
bosses. They
Yeah.
never
Yeah.
like, yeah, like there was a boss in that game. That was the first time I ever experienced the boss in a video game. It was really cool. For
And
some
those
reason,
are,
there was dinosaurs still living, you know, and
yeah.
in the
Well,
penguin
they
world.
are in the ice in the Arctic, so maybe it
Yeah,
makes
maybe, I
sense
don't know.
because they could. No, but I was going to say that these boss fights, they some of these I don't know all of them, but they are also like kaijus, you know,
Yeah,
like and this is also interesting because we can also analyze your mind by looking at these games and understanding like, okay, this guy really likes his kaijus, and yeah,
yes, that is true.
it's great seeing like these games in retrospective and thinking like, okay, these are connected between each other, right? Like at first glance you might think that they are not, but the fact that these are amongst your favorite games and there's one connection between one or the other, like Metal Gear and this game, or Castlevania. Yeah, and also now that I look at these, all the games are from Japan, are Japanese games.
Hmm.
So interesting, interesting.
Yeah,
Uh,
there's one like American game developers never got my interest a lot because I don't know why, but it's I love the the over the top, out of this world, kind of fantasy
mhm,
that's in Japanese culture. And also like I feel like in with Japanese culture in general, like they're really good at importing art from different places around the world and then like making them their own, you know, like putting their own culture into it and their own meaning and understanding into it. And that makes it so much more interesting to me.
yeah,
Like I can't play another fantasy game that is based off of, you know, Tolkien world, you know, like Lord of the Rings, elves and dwarfs and stuff. Like that
yeah.
doesn't interest me anymore. Or like sci-fi that like just resembles the same Star Trek style, like sci-fi, even though I love Star Trek. But it to me, it's bland for some reason. I don't know why. Um and only when and but you know, American developers do amazing things. Like I love Crystal Dynamics' work. I love the Soul Reaver series, and Legacy of Kain. That was kind of like a different departure from like what you usually see with American developers. And I yeah, it's really rare to like identify with like play an American game for me and like identify with it. um the work of Naughty Dog recently has been
Yeah,
really great.
yeah,
And that even though it's like it's not my favorite, it's very realistic and photorealistic, and that's great. But really, I go there for the acting, you
mhm.
know, like and the technological marvel that they have achieved, you know, with animation and motion capture and all of that. And the gameplay is great too, but like the worlds that they like the American developers create usually are not my favorite. And that's why I like a lot of the indie games. Like a lot of indie games have adopted this idea of like it doesn't have to be photorealistic. It can be stylistic and create your own style in weird world, that is not just photorealistic.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and I see that more with Japanese developers or indie developers, and less with like generally the American audience. Um, But yeah, but there's, I'll play games whatever they are. I just got Ghost of Tsushima, so like I'm gonna play that next.
and
Uh,
and, and to your point is like there's more people making games.
mhm.
That means from different backgrounds, from different countries, from different ages, from different everything.
Yeah.
And this is great because yeah, you basically, if you like certain type of games, there are many people working on those games. Probably they are
Yeah.
like indie studios, and if I like other type of games, I have those games. And to me, another super cool thing, and this is related to what we do, is if there's no game that fulfills your needs, you can go and make your own game just for you, and
Yeah.
have fun with that. So yeah,
And that's what Unity provides, that's your job. And
yeah.
that's what Visual Studio does. And that's in .NET. And that's what I do. So
Yeah, yeah,
both of our tools combined, we can create any game.
yeah, 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 absolutely. And yeah, for free. And this is not sponsored by any of those
Yeah,
companies,
it's not.
but
I know.
but it's great that thanks to that, thanks to work, we can have
Yeah.
these conversations. So
Yeah.
yeah, and yeah, I have to thank you again, Abdullah, for taking your time. We were thinking, oh yeah, maybe we're not gonna take more than an hour. It's already an hour and 40 minutes, but
Oh, wow.
it felt like 10 minutes or something.
Yeah.
It's always a
I'm sorry. I
pleasure.
drank a lot of caffeine today. So like I talked a lot about
No,
the
no, no.
things that I love.
It was so
I'm
fun.
sorry about that.
I learned a lot. I had so much fun. It went from daytime to nighttime, so that's
I
also
noticed.
always that's also great to see like the progression of time throughout my window. But again, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for being so open about your life, about what you do, about your past. Um, I really appreciate this. And in 40 years or something, when we are older and we can come back to these conversations, I think it's all worth it. So thank you so much.
Yeah, and I really appreciate the invitation.
No, thank you.
It really means a lot. And like you said, it goes back full circle to what we said at the beginning. This is us creating our own stories, and after thousands of years, this will be documented,
Yeah, yeah,
hopefully,
yeah.
and people can look at their history and look at
Absolutely.
like, yeah, because we're documenting Penguin Adventure, and people can take a look at it later
Yeah,
in the future.
absolutely. And yeah, and your perspective. I mean, yeah, there are not many people with your perspective that have this story. So yeah, it's great. One last thing, where can people reach out to you if they want to learn more about
Sure.
Penguin Adventure?
I am on Twitter at Indie Saudi. That's my handle there. That's the best place to reach out to me.
Okay.
If you want to talk about game development, you want to talk about even my work, I work with .NET for game development. If you want to learn more about Visual Studio and Unity, or just want to see some food that I cook sometimes. I love to cook.
Nice.
Yeah, reach out to me on Twitter. My DMs are open. Anybody can DM me. And yeah, just reach out. Just say hi.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you very much, Abdullah. I'll let you enjoy your weekend, but yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Bye bye.